Hello and good evening, and thank you for tuning in from wherever you are in the world for this session of Veterans Advanced Energy Week at the end of day 3. We hope you were able to catch that last session on the program on the geopolitics of the energy transition and engage with company recruiters throughout the conference program today. My name is Zachary Strauss, Assistant Director at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center, and I will be your moderator for this session. I am pleased to have the opportunity to introduce tonight's film, Nation in Transition, so I'll moderate the panel conversation to follow, featuring the film director, as well as a group of leading experts focusing on energy and economic development in tribal communities, particularly in the Navajo and Hopi nations. This session is organized in partnership with the American Resilience Project, which has graciously granted us the rights to screen this film for you all this evening. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes from me. This event is on the record, and we are currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We encourage you to post about what you hear today and share on social media using the hashtag VetsEnergyWeek, and by tagging us at AC Global Energy and Vets_Energy. If you'd like to participate in our panel conversation after the film today, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A portal located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the event, and we'll incorporate them as appropriate. But please note, only those directly engaging via the Veterans Advanced Energy app will be able to submit questions. And now I'd love to provide a short introduction to the film we're about to see today. In building on the success of an award-winning debut film in the Current Revolution series, this American Resilience Project film, Nation in Transition, explores the energy transition in the Southwest, where power and water systems are increasingly stressed due to more frequent extreme heat and drought, and where growing numbers of coal-fired power plants are closing as a result of market forces. Within the wider context of our global energy transition, the film highlights the coal to renewables transition in the Navajo Nation and across northern Arizona, detailing the stories of workers, their families and communities, business and tribal leaders, utility executives, policymakers, and environmental activists. The film offers a roadmap for accelerating and navigating the just energy transition for those affected by the rapidly changing energy economy amidst the shift towards a carbon-free future. Now, without further ado, let's roll the film, and I look forward to engaging with our panelists after it concludes, so don't go anywhere.
It takes a lot of water to produce our energy. It takes a lot of energy to move our water. There's a total lift of about 2,000 feet with a dozen or so separate pumping plants to do that lift. The canal is 300 some miles long as it comes into Phoenix and then heads south to Tucson. And it is the largest user of electricity in the state of Arizona. We need to pump water 24 hours a day, whether the sun is shining or not. And coal provided that reliability.
For half a century, coal has been one of the cheapest forms of electricity available. It's no longer so cheap. The shift to clean energy and electric vehicles is already happening, and is happening faster than anyone expected. Now our task is to manage that transition to ensure that it is both just and sustainable.
There's a lot of economic prosperity that's going to come along with this transformation, but there are going to be costs. Some whole categories of jobs are just going to disappear.
Take a new job far from home, or face unemployment. That's the decision facing hundreds of employees of the Navajo generating station.
Last year, officials from the Navajo Nation and Salt River Project decided to shut down the plant.
It is emotional. A lot of people, when they lose their livelihood, it's like losing a loved one. That meal is not there no more. The payment for the mortgage or the payment for the vehicle, those are all gone.
with our daily routines and habits, all the way up to the way we organize geopolitics, the way we distribute wealth and power in the world, are wrapped up in this thing that we call the energy system. So when we change it, we're going to get changes in everything else at the same time. We need to start learning now, and we need to learn at a pace and a scale that we've never learned before.
Like 1940, there's only 400,000 people, population in the state of Arizona. Now we got 7 million people. For 50 years now, we gave low-cost energy and power for the state of Arizona so they could have what they have now. We didn't profit from it.
For decades, a large portion of the Navajo Nation's income has derived from coal royalties. Coal that was mined here and used to produce energy for Phoenix, Vegas, and California didn't yield a quality of life that the people in Phoenix, Vegas, and California enjoy.
The raw resources, Navajo resources, were purchased at low prices, rock bottom prices. Navajo water from the upper basin Colorado River was used to help with the operation of the Navajo generating station. We waived our rights to claim any of that water for the duration of the power plant, and we never got any payment for it.
There used to be a lot of water around here. We didn't have to travel a distance to get water. So I would say that we spent more money for our water than people that have running water. Because we had to buy gas, we had wear and tear on our vehicle to get water from the chapter house and haul them back for our drinking water or for our livestock. I'm glad that they're shutting it down. But we would like to see them to fix it the way it was before. And they just can't leave it like that and leave.
I'm 50 years old and these guys are just now leaving. And I've spent the prime of my life battling the pollution here and not being able to herd sheep on my family ancestral land and not being able to farm here. And so I never got a chance to use any of this land.
The plant was built when I was in high school. My dad was hired by SRP to work at the plant. So it was important to our family that he was employed there, and it was a good thing for us. I started at SRP in 1979 as an operator trainee. Once the plant was built and people were employed there, I think we thought it was just going to be there forever. There was no thought that it was ever going to close down. People had raised their families there. It just seemed like part of the community. So the news of shutting it down really was a shock, I think, to everyone. It was just unexpected. I had always thought I was going to retire there, but word came down that we weren't going to be economically viable anymore.
As much as the Navajo Nation has depended on the coal and this operation, it has never really brought prosperity to the nation, and it has never really taken the nation out of the high unemployment rate that persists even today.
I'm a union iron worker for local ironworkers 433 in LA. So it's a ways from here to find work, but that's the only place I can find work. Nothing around here for us. So you got the mine and the plant, there's only 600 workers, but there's 300,000 of us. And then where do they find work? There's no work at home. So you got mom and dads having to travel that far away to find work, and you got your kids at home with grandma, grandpas, and having the whole nation 50% unemployed, and then you got 60% of people in poverty.
What we're confronted with now is declining government resources and a larger population to sustain. The great opportunity here is to invest in solar or wind for communities that have bore the brunt and the adverse impacts of extraction, but never received the appropriate compensation for giving up land, water, cultural or religious resources that may be contaminated forever. It's critical that we chart a new path defined by our traditional values, being able to have a family, your animals, and multi-generations living in the community you've always lived in. And at the same time, participate in the modern world and in the community of nations.
I think we have a design challenge. The way that we design the ownership of that energy, the geography of that energy, the way that we design the markets, it is the opportunity of a century to build a low carbon future that does more for us than just replace the energy system that we have with a new one. And that's one of the things we can start learning with what's happening here in Arizona around the Navajo Nation, because we've never tried to do anything like this on this scale, this complexity, this deeply integrated into our human systems.
We have a long and not so great relationship with the federal government, not to mention all the other entities that have come on and off the Navajo Nation. We're still a sovereign nation. And when we say sovereign, that means we can determine our own destiny. It's not only a trust issue between the Navajo people and outside entities. It's a trust issue between we as well as the Navajo government and our Navajo communities. We're a big government. We have about 300,000 members, and that means we have to build consensus among our own Navajo people and our own communities. If you don't have a total buy-in of the whole community, the discontent with one stakeholder who's not happy with the process, their discontent kind of grows and it starts reaching into other parts of the community, and pretty soon you don't have that buy-in. There's no trust of the process anymore, and people feel left out.
We collectively need to win. I don't give a damn which party wins. I want answers. When a conflict arises, that ability to pick up the phone and call the city manager and say, this is what my attorneys are telling me, and that we need to go to court with you. What are your attorneys telling you? And can we kick the attorneys out of the room and solve this problem? That's essential.
Arizona Public Service Company has been the largest provider of electricity in the state of Arizona for more than 100 years. We operate 2 coal-fired power plants, one in northeastern Arizona, and that's the Cholla Power Plant. And that plant is slated to close in 2025. And we announced that closure in 2015. It is really important to start planning before there are plans to formally close the plant and start talking about what will happen when the plant closes. It is never too early to begin these conversations. So you would have regulators and legislators at the table, you would have your Public Utility Commission representatives at the table, environmental groups, faith groups, labor organizations, and then obviously the electric utility. And a lot of these folks bring different perspectives, and that's one of the challenges in this space, is figuring out how to reconcile those perspectives.
You can't over-communicate. We're beginning to think about other power plants that we have. What's the transition that we want to help those communities with now, even if they may not close for another 7-8 years? Begin those discussions, because these transitions take a long time. We made a commitment to the Navajo Nation overall to make this transition work. And so I think there's opportunities to do it no matter if you're an investor-owned utility, public power utility, or a co-op utility.
In the case of SRP, they provided information to the community about timelines. They announced that they were going to actually offer jobs to all of the employees. And that was a huge thing. I can't even believe they did that. If I were not offered another job within SRP, I don't know what I would have done.
Providing this level of support, providing these resources, will help to contribute to a vibrant economy here in Arizona. And that is so important for our business success. And so we've got every confidence that this will be beneficial not just for our customers and our employees, but also for our shareholders.
We have reclaimed mine areas. You got Navajo Mine and McKinley Mine near Gallup. Then you got Kayenta and Black Mesa Mine. 3 areas that we can build off to build solar fields. And then we got power lines coming through our homeland. We can light up the city of Phoenix, Tucson.
The negotiations between the utilities and the Navajo Nation has left the Navajo Nation with a certain amount of assets from the Navajo generating station. The Navajo Nation was able to get the water pumps at the generating station. The Navajo Nation was able to get 500 megawatts of transmission lines committed to them from the Bureau of Reclamations. So those are really significant.
The biggest question was, if we have transmission lines and power generating facilities on the Navajo Nation, why are there still Navajo people out there without electricity? A lot of the times people already live where they live. They live in their ancestral areas. They've grown up there for generations, and that's where they want to be. Every community has a group of people who don't have electricity, they don't have water. It's really expensive to run power lines, and so renewable energy really offers those local solutions.
NTUA made a decision a number of years ago to start to develop renewable energy within the reservation, recognizing the abundance of renewable energy available here. We hired approximately 250 local Navajo and trained them. Many of them have gone on to work at other plants and continue to build. Now that they're built, They're providing energy for the local area, reasonably priced and reliable. In addition to that, we sell renewable energy credits to others outside of the Navajo Nation, and the revenue from that goes directly back to construct lines to those folks that currently don't have electric power within the nation.
The COVID-19 death toll continues to rise in the U.S. Fear is mounting the spread of the virus could devastate tribal communities.
I think one of the reasons why we were so impacted on the Navajo Nation with COVID is the fact that you have a lot of people not having access to things as simple as information. A lot of the information was spread through the internet. And when you don't have electricity, you don't have computers, you don't have TV, you don't have satellite, now you're kind of limited to if you get radio signal, if you get cell service. It also limits the storage of their food. This requires them, if they don't have electricity, to go and get ice. If their stores were closed, they were going further out and further out. And so they would have to go to the border towns when our stores weren't open. A lot of our relatives have respiratory issues and they have challenges with the air quality. That being compounded by a virus that attacks that exact thing really affected people that were already in a disadvantaged position. And so owning that process going forward in energy development for us is what we feel is needed in order for us to make sure we don't go down those same paths again. Out of college, I returned back home and I really was looking to create jobs and solve issues for my people. We looked at how we could form a company that would develop projects that we feel are in tune with the cultural and the local values. And we feel like we brought some of those values from Silicon Valley with fundraising and capital investment and markets into the nation, so that we can utilize those resources and those allies to be able to develop our projects.
Now what do we got? Finish it again. Check that. So reverse your polarity on your leads there and then remeasure. And guess what's going to happen to my charge controller?
Negative.
Right, you see that negative on there?
Okay. We're here in Hard Rock, Arizona, doing our very first solar training, and it's a 6 to 8 week program. We have about 10 Native students who are participating. And this is really a huge effort for us to invest in the Native community and be able to employ our own people to provide off-grid power for families that need it. One of the goals of the workforce training program that we have here is to prepare and empower local Native people to go into the solar workforce. That doesn't necessarily have to be here on the reservation, and they don't necessarily have to be installers, but we do want to give them the tools to succeed out in the renewable energy world. A lot of the applicants knew or have relatives and family that don't have electricity, so they want to be able to install their own system and know how to maintain it.
This is an immense opportunity for us to think about what traditional indigenous governance works, and it should be established between Indian tribes and not dependent on the federal government. Then we will be able to demonstrate to tribes across the country how they can work collectively to achieve our goals as people who are indigenous to the United States, but not dependent on it to prosper.
There's no model or template for how to do this. We are making this up as we go. But we do believe that it is our social responsibility to ensure that we help these legacy coal communities whose contributions were critical to the success that we experience today, and really for the economy that our nation is built on. This is because of people who have done hard work in coal mines and coal plants. And we owe them a debt of gratitude, ensuring that we don't leave them behind as we make this transition that we have to make. We cannot leave them behind.
Historically, energy has been one of the unfortunate drivers of inequality. Energy is deeply wrapped up in how we distribute wealth in the world. It takes money from all of us to pay for our fuels and our electricity, and it sends it off into the hands of a much smaller array of people and institutions and organizations. We could do a better job of designing that so that the energy system actually works the other way. It becomes a generator of economic security that helps alleviate poverty. It becomes a generator of income.
If we get this transition in northern Arizona right, we can take all the lessons from that and apply them to many other transitions that we'll be facing in the years to come. Like the electric vehicle transformation, we're going to need a transition plan and transition assistance for that to take care of the jobs and the communities that are dependent on the old internal combustion engine that is going to be going away shortly. And the transition that coal communities are facing today are going to be faced by natural gas communities. We're going to start seeing communities suffering from the loss of natural gas fracking, natural gas processing activities, and the power plants that are run on natural gas.
The biggest question is, do we have the political will to come together and govern ourselves? That is where we have our biggest problem. If we fail to do so, I think we as a country certainly won't be a global leader anymore. And globally, if we as a species fail to face these things, I think we do face some dire consequences. What that means for us long term, it's hard to say. But, the world will go on. It existed before we were here as a species, and it will exist regardless of where we go. We may leave it damaged behind us, but it will survive us.
How do we ensure that these things exist for our kids into the future? To me, it's that simple. I want to make sure that I have said what I need to say and have done what I needed to do. And that way, at least the future generations will never say to me, why didn't you speak up for me? And, I'll never be to blame. There's nothing that beats a clean conscience, I don't think.
Wow, that was an incredibly poignant film. And thank you so much, Roger, and the American Resilience Project again for providing us the rights to screen that for everyone today. I'd like to now turn to our panel conversation for this session, when we should debrief the film and discuss the themes and messages from the film. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our lineup of speakers this evening. I'd like to formally welcome Mr. Edward D., the Executive Director of the Navajo Government Development Office and an Army veteran. Mr. Roger Sorkin, Executive Director of the American Resilience Project and the Director of the film Nation in Transition. Dr. Suzanne Singer, the Executive Director of Native Renewables. Mr. Ian Masayevsa, Solar Technician at Native Renewables and a U.S. Navy veteran. And last but not least, Ms. Terza Tippin-Poe, a Principal at ICS Trio Global Solutions, a lecturer and mentor at Harvard's Arctic Initiative, as well as a non-resident senior fellow with us at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. Thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and your experience with our audience today. Without further ado, let's jump into our first round of questions, but I want to remind our audience first that they want to submit their questions in the Q&A portal at the bottom of their screen. We encourage you to do so, and we'll incorporate your questions as appropriate throughout the program. So I'd like to start with Ed, and Ed and all our speakers, feel free to introduce yourselves and where you're coming from before you jump into your question. But for you, Ed, as we saw in the film, almost 3/4 of all the people in the US who currently do not have access to electricity live and reside in the Navajo Nation. How are you and the Navajo Government Development Office working to improve energy access for the Navajo people? And do you have any ongoing initiatives or a long-term strategy to accomplish that goal?
Unmute. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Just looking at that film again, I mean, I've seen it several times. It's really emotional. Again, my name is Edward D. I work for the Office of Government Development under the legislative branch of Navajo government in Window Rock, Arizona. There's, of course, our government is very similar to state and federal government. There's other branches that have initiatives that are being developed. But with respect to the question and our office work with a commission on government development. We produce or at least make recommendation to the Navajo Nation Council through the Board of Election Supervisors on how to reform government. And one of the biggest I've been a strong advocate since I came to the office 5 years ago, is sustainability. With my sustainability background is, if one is to make recommendation to reform the government, you need to have some sustainability guidelines and policies in place, which the Navajo Nation, quite frankly, doesn't have it at the moment. So that's been a bulk of my work. To the core of the question is this: we realize that Navajo people living on Navajo Nation lack access to electricity, in some cases, running water, indoor plumbing. And so that's being addressed at the moment by Navajo Nation Council, by the Office of Navajo President and Vice President, and also in collaboration with a lot of the local sub-governmental unit, what we call as chapters. There are 110 chapter structure, which are local municipality-like, I guess that's how you can equate it for the mainstream society. So they're addressing a lot of that. And the ARPA funding that's been given to the Navajo Nation and many other tribes. So some policies and legislation are being crafted to address the lack of electricity, lack of plumbing, and lack access to clean water. So the work is being pursued at the moment, but for decades, no one was really addressing this at the core level of government. I think what this pandemic basically did is really push the nation into that conversation of, look, we need to have access to water, indoor plumbing, and as well as electricity. It was mentioned in the film briefly by one of the members from the Renewable Energy, Native Renewables rather, or Navajo Power. So it was eloquently stated there. But lastly is this, with respect to our office, there was legislation that was introduced about a couple of years ago that basically died in terms of updating Navajo Nation energy policy. So the current energy policy it's dated like 8 years ago. It rarely touches anything regarding to renewable standards, sustainability, and mandates. So it's basically focused on coal, fossil fuel energy systems. So that needs to be changed and updated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed, for your insight and providing that information for our audience. I'd now like to move to Roger, who's the director of the film. But in addition to that, you also serve as a security fellow with the Truman National Security Project, and you've been making films focused on the intersection of energy transition and national security for some time. So I recall you helped, you screened The Burden, which focuses on fossil fuel dependence for our forward deployed forces abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan. So you've been thinking about these topics for quite a while. So in your view, how are climate action, energy transition, and national security interconnected? And in terms of this film, how is this movie and the messages presented here, how did those align with your understanding of that relationship?
Yes, thank you, Zach. So, climate change, when we try to take on such a huge challenge, how do we deal with climate change? There's so many aspects to it. I think it's clear to just about everybody who studies this that energy consumption, the way we get our energy, the way we transport it, the way we integrate it into our economies and how we depend upon it, that system needs to change more than any other if we're going to address climate change. I started making films about this because I was dismayed at the high level, sounds quaint now, I mean, everything is politicized, but at the time it's very high level of politicization around climate change. And it seemed odd to me when I was hearing senior leaders of the military talk about it in terms of environmental security, not in terms of sometimes what can be a more sentimental conversation about saving the earth. They were talking about it in very stark terms about saving lives and money. And I thought that was a good way to attempt to change the conversation and maybe depoliticize some of that. So I think understanding that our environmental security, our energy security, our economic security are all intertwined. And in this particular story, it's not necessarily a story about national security, but I mean, we can all agree that our domestic stability is related to our national security. And if we have communities that are not stable, that's a danger to all of us. And so in this particular case, when we look at the Navajo Nation and we look at all of the injustices that have occurred over the years, we look at the treaties that were not honored, and we see the energy system, an extractive energy system not working for the people that actually gave up the land for it. Any sort of solution, sure, we can switch over our technologies, but I think for the sake of what's right, we need to make whole the communities that we have broken over the years. And so that's my dual agenda in making films like this is to create some sort of environmental justice around this and accelerate our path to clean energy so that we can deal with climate change and improve our national security.
Roger, for that answer, and again for being here today as the director of the film. I'd like to now move on to discuss renewable energy opportunities and energy justice solutions in the Navajo Nation that are currently ongoing. And we're lucky to have with us two people today working on the ground to pursue some of those solutions. So I'd like to first turn to Dr. Singer. Well, we first heard from you a little bit in the film. I'd love to learn more. Can you tell our audience more about Native Renewables, your organization? What is your mission purpose? What have you achieved so far? What do you hope to accomplish in the short and the long term? And what do you think your impact has been on the community so far?
Hi, everyone. I'm coming from Flagstaff, Arizona. That's where Native Renewables is based out of. And our mission is to empower Native families to achieve energy independence, and mostly through solar energy, residential solar. So I guess just start off, it feels amazing to be able to create our own opportunities. We're Indigenous-led, 100% Native staff members, and other things we're working on is creating opportunities to support building an economy around renewable energy within our own tribal communities. Currently, we have 4 Indigenous full-time staff members, 1 part-time staff, and they have decades, over 48 combined years of experience in solar, and we have the engineering, electrical, technical backgrounds, most of us. And I think what's exciting this year is if all goes well, we're going to grow to 5 full-time staff and 5 or 6 part-time staff members, which is pretty exciting. But we focus a lot on off-grid solar power in the Southwest is a lot of good resources, the perfect technology for both the Hopi and Navajo nations. So ultimately, we're trying to provide enough power for families to have refrigeration, TVs, devices for charging, and some of the other side benefits for the families, or you can reduce the emissions that they have. Sometimes families will save money by not paying so much for gasoline generator. Ideally, less trips to the store to get food or ice or gas. I think that's one of the things we're trying to quantify because part of our impacts on a family by family basis. But other things that we have going on this year, we've trained over the past 12 months, trained 14 tribal members. Several of those have installed over 11 off-grid systems as part of their training, which is really cool. And we're in the middle of several home site visits to replace batteries for existing systems that are out in the field. And with the pandemic going on, we did a lot of education in the communities. I think that's one of the unique things that we bring and also providing travel, helping support travel for people that are interested. But we were able to transition our training to virtual this year a little bit because of the impacts of COVID, kind of ruined our plans for 2020. But even so, we still were able to donate thousands of solar products out into the communities. And long-term goals, long-term is everybody has power or water, internet, you name it. I think that's kind of what we're pushing for, our big vision. And any way we can support that, which is great. But short-term goals, trying to get to over 100 installs a year and 20 battery replacements and continue growing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And any way we can support you in achieving those goals and to get your message out there, let us know. We're happy to support you all. Moving on to one of your colleagues, Mr. Ian Masayevsa, who is a solar technician at Native Renewables, as well as a Navy veteran and a member of the Hopi tribe, Hopi Nation. Ian, turning to you, from your experience, what do you see as the economic and the social benefits of bringing home solar to members of the Navajo and Hopi communities? Have you seen an impact to date? And do you see rooftop and home solar, the initiatives that you're putting forth in your day-to-day job, as the solutions to energy poverty in the Navajo and Hopi nations or in other indigenous communities in the region?
Hi, hello everybody. My name is Ian Masayas. I'm coming from a village in Arizona, Samupa of Arizona. Coming from the military, when I moved back, there were solar systems throughout the Hopi reservation. It was hard to get any technicians to do any maintenance on them, so that was the hard part. Gradually, the field has been growing a little bit larger with the help of Native Renewables. They were able to train local indigenous people and basically just anybody who wants to learn or shares an interest in solar, passive solar voltaics. They're able to instead of having to call contractors from off the reservation, they're able to service the local community. And what's good about that is they're local, they're helping the community. And not only do they not have to pay exorbitant rates going off the reservation, the cost is significantly cheaper by having to only go down the road or a couple miles down the road. So as far as socioeconomic, that's bringing a lot more jobs, and I think it's helping the community fix themselves, and it just helps them so they're not stuck with no power, no electricity. And our closest town from where I'm at right now is Flagstaff, Arizona, and that's 95 miles away. So it's quite a drive to get any type of major supplies. They've got ice stations right down the road, maybe about 15 miles from where I'm at. But if you don't have electricity, which a lot of the Hopis don't, and a lot of the Navajo don't have electricity, then you can't have a refrigerator. So you're having to drive these extra miles just to obtain that, like it was said in a video. But coming back to the reservation, it's just really helped me as a Navy veteran to share my experience and to kind of help the local community. And I was an avionics technician while I was in, and so I had a basic understanding of electricity, AC, DC theory, and so it was kind of a good fit for me to jump right back into the environmental background. And another thing that's not really spoken or talked about a lot is water. Water is a very precious resource, and having electricity to be able to pump water or establish, pumping stations for water is a big thing that we cherish, and we need more of those around the reservations.
Thank you so much, Ian, for sharing that and your lived experience as a veteran, as a solar technician, and as a Hopi native. Thank you so much for your insight, and we'll come back to you, especially with regard to your veteran experience later in the conversation. I'd like to turn now to Tirza. Tirza, you have a lot of experience working on energy justice and energy access for Indigenous communities across the country and across the world. And in thinking about these initiatives in Arizona as a model and the current reality of Native communities on the ground in the Hopi and Navajo nations, how do these experiences relate to those of other tribal communities you've worked with in the past, either in Alaska or South Dakota or elsewhere, for example?
Great. Well, thanks, Zach, and thanks to the Atlantic Council for including me in this discussion. And I have to say this, honored to be in the company of all of these folks from the Navajo Nation. I will admit right away, I watched this video before we got together today, and I have no other way to put it, but I was blown away. And why? Well, first, I come from a lived experience, a background where my life and the lives of my people, which are the Inupiaq of the Arctic Ocean, the US Arctic, my home village is Utiavik, our lives were transformed by energy development. And in much sort of the same time frame, a little later than what we saw in Nation in Transition just now, but I watched the social economic impacts of fossil fuel development transform our communities on the edge of the Arctic, and also an entire state, which is the state of Alaska. And that profoundly impacted my worldview. So that lived experience, having gone through fossil fuel development, and what it taught me before I ever worked around the globe, as you put it, it doesn't feel like that. I work a lot with communities. Feels like I work in a community every time I go somewhere, is that the extractive resource development model is not sustainable. And what the Navajo Nation has done that we just saw in this video is flip that extractive resource model on its head. And I have to say it up front, that extractive model of how you develop, you go to a place, you extract its resource from the ground, and usually not including the people who are most deeply impacted by your activity, and you export it off somewhere. That was Alaska's model for decades, the environment I grew up in. And up until recently, until we see this example here, it has been the model throughout Indigenous communities in the Americas. And what I'm seeing here is a change. And I have to say, part of my professional background was for many years working in the building of pipelines, and then ultimately a big chunk of it in actually looking for fossil fuels around the world. So ironically, I end up in fossil fuel extraction. I'll say this, what do we have if we don't have an extractive model? What we have here is a collaborative development model. What Navajo Nation has done is not only done, as all of the speakers before me, Edward, Ian, and Dr. Singer have pointed out, is they've not only created, or I think somebody in video said, design their own destiny, determine their own destiny was the quote. But they created a model that could help everyone in the world. So this is, yes, it's about indigenous ways of being, which it doesn't surprise me that this model that we've just looked at was created in indigenous communities, because our model isn't extractive. And I don't want to get too far afield, but I think that's fundamental, that this is an exportable model, one we haven't seen at this scale. And all of I'm just restating what's obvious in the video, but it's for the rest of the world as we confront energy justice issues, not just in indigenous communities, but in urban environments, developing countries within the developed world, right? Navajo Nation has given us an example of how a community can come together and develop capacity using a non-extractive model, helping ourselves and our communities, and how not to do it, to have an exit strategy, to understand what footprint, what you're going to leave for generations to come. Those are fundamental principles to sustainability for the world. And so I hope what we get from this is an export model, how to export collaborative development when it comes to energy. And energy, as has been argued just now before me, is, I believe, a fundamental right. It powers the water we use, as was pointed out. It allows us to learn and grow. So I think I get really excited when I see examples like this. I have a couple others, but I'm going to let others expound on it, because really this Navajo Nation and what they're doing is the embodiment of how we should be moving sustainably into energy development.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing your insight and your personal experience, and for being here today. It's always a pleasure to have you on our panels and programs. I'd like to go back now to Mr. D. So we've talked a lot about the opportunities for renewable energy going forward, but I think it's important also to take a step back and think about what's going to happen in the transition, the people who might lose out in the transition. So we know that it'll bring benefits, but it will also levy costs, particularly for coal miners and other fossil fuel workers. And how do you view this economic transition from a government perspective, and what strategies are you devising or have you devised to help ensure fossil fuel workers and the Navajo Nation or in the Hopi Nation are not left behind?
Okay, so thank you again, Zach. I didn't catch the last end of your question. My internet is not quite stable here in Window Rock, and Ian, of course, mentioned that being on the reservation, the connectivity can be a challenge. So I got the gist of the question. So with respect to some potential economic development opportunities, regarding the Navajo Nation, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there by the transition from fossil-based energy development extractive model toward more a just transition, basically in energy. I really like what Dr. Paul Hurd mentioned in the film about the opportunities that are available with the EVs. The combustion engine system is phasing out, and it will phase out. And so what I noticed about Navajo Nation that I can use as an example is in working with a couple of folks from ASU is Tesla. If you go on Tesla's website, there is no charging station on Navajo Nation. There's one that's supposedly being planned in the Kayenta area. And so that is basically the only thing that you'll see on Tesla's website. I think I lost everybody here. I'm going in and out. I see.
You're good. Continue.
So my point is this. Okay, so my point is that there's a vast opportunity for renewable and EVs on Navajo and Hopi and many other indigenous Indian nations across the country. And quite frankly, what I also learned is all the states surrounding Navajo Nation, there's 8 Western states that have signed onto an MOU where they are in partnership of advancing, enhancing EV charging station, whether by Electrify America or Tesla. Navajo Nation is a huge nation. And why is Navajo Nation leadership and Navajo Nation not at the table in wanting to have access to be a partner with the MOU and to be on the front line of planning for these EV charging stations? So that's one opportunity that's, I think, that we're missing out. With respect to the other question about a lot of the miners that worked in the mine, folks that worked in the mine, Navajo folks, and some other Hopi people, as well as over at the plant, I believe there was an agreement already in place by SRP that transitioned a lot of those workers elsewhere. It was briefly mentioned in the film as well, but a lot of them, of course, did not make that transition. And there's vast opportunities for renewable, whether you're talking about large scale or microgrids to be developed on the nation, where these folks who were employed with SRP or the mines can make those transition. And it's just a matter of a collaboration of all the folks who are basically affected by this and who also advocates of renewables and sustainability coming together. I think with that type of mind and energy, intelligence and human capital, I think we can go a long way in advancing, a transition that is sustainable and just. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. We have a great question in here from an audience member. Margaret Jackson asks, and I'm going to pivot this to Dr. Singer, what is necessary to scale this model of self-development of homegrown solar development integration as a government, private sector, collaboration, finance? What do you see, Dr. Singer, as the means to grow what you're trying to accomplish here on the Navajo and Hopi nations?
So I think definitely an investment in people, continuing to grow the technical skills to be able to do our own projects. So everyone from, I guess, analogy on the utility scale, everyone that can screw in the panels to people who can actually manage the day-to-day operations of what's happening, I think would be amazing. From, I think, what'll be exciting, hopefully these few coming years, is in more investment in Indigenous communities. I've heard, at least from a philanthropic side, a study was done of a lot of philanthropic organizations, and something like 1.3% went to, I think, Indigenous and BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, which is really very tiny. So I think increasing that in the communities, people who do the work in the communities, is really important. I think working with, I think what'll also be exciting, I think, is it being explored more also for economic development opportunities, is creating or some sort of model to create our own products or our own manufacturing efforts, I think is also being explored. And I think that'll be exciting to see where that goes. Always could use, along with the investment, the financing pieces, figuring out how that works, and exploring more tax benefits and incentives for tribal nations and collaborations with outside entities, I think could also go a long way. And I guess private sector, some of the best partners that we have had have empowered us to, learn, like basically train us to be the trainers in a lot of the efforts that we have in really asking what it is that we need. And I will also say the best partners do their homework too on where our nations are, and don't try to, peg all tribal nations as needing the same thing. Like, oh, I know, we've had one person say, I know exactly what you need. This is the best product. Oh, by the way, where is Navajo? And it's like, oh my goodness. So, so those are, I'll just say, great partnerships really go a long way in working with tribal organizations and tribal nations.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer to a really poignant question. We hope to see that grow, and hope you do continue to develop those relationships with those partners across the country. I also think dive into this idea of investing in people and in Mine's workforce development. And as you know, this week is Veterans Advanced Energy Week, and we talk a lot about the skills and the strategies that veterans can bring to the renewable energy workforce. And we are lucky to have two veterans on with us. I'd like to start with Ian. So Ian, if I'd like to ask you a question here. In your opinion as a Navy veteran, why are veterans aptly suited for careers in advanced energy? How did the skills you acquired in service translate to the work that you did in the field, working in the solar industry?
Hi again. Military members generally travel all over the world, and we see how much we need fossil fuels. Coming from the aviation community, we use JP5, JP4, and we use a lot of it. We get thousands and thousands of gallons every time we refuel these airplanes. So to be able to try to get away from that, I know it's not going to happen anytime soon, but to be able to get away from that, I think the military members we realize, how reliant we are on this fossil fuel, and it's not going to be around forever. So with that in mind, I think we want to see more renewable energy. We want to see advanced energy. We want to see solar. So I think if you look at it from that context, the military members understand that we can't sustain relying on fossil fuels for very much longer. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
What skills do you think that you brought with you, and why do you think a veteran or veterans in the U.S. Armed Forces is an apt candidate for example, Dr. Singer's workforce development program or any sort of development program in the renewable energy space?
I think one of the things that military people are also, we're very resourceful. And we're able to make do with what we have. That's not always the best course of action, but we kind of think outside of the box. We kind of think, what else can we do? How else can we make our situation a little bit better? And I think with that mentality, we're able to, for instance, if you're looking at a solar project regarding water, how we're going to install modules for a farm. Not every situation is going to be the same. Not everything is taught like as in a textbook or in a classroom. So we have to learn on the fly, and I think military members are good at that. And I think that's what a lot of military members bring to the table, just being able to identify, we need to go away from fossil fuel and come up with alternative ways to create energy, and just the resourcefulness. A lot of them are resourcefulness. Another thing is we got military members that come from all over the world. We've got foreign nationals that come in and join the U.S. military. I've got a lot of Filipino friends that came in through different programs. So you not only have a local community, but you also have a global network of individuals to be able to help you in certain areas. Like Suzanne Singer said, not every situation is the same. There's a lot of different scenarios out there, and just having a network of individuals, of military people, and people who have a certain mindset, certain work mentality. I think that's critical, and I think that's crucial, and I'm glad to be a part of that.
Thank you so much for your comments and for your service to our country, and for bringing those skills back to the next mission, which is battling climate change. So thank you for putting that all together for us during Veterans Advanced Energy Week. I want to quickly ask the same question to Ed, if you'd like to answer, if you have any thoughts about your service and bringing your skills from service to the mission you have before you today.
Thanks again to all the fellow comrades who are on this conversation with us. Thank you for your service. You're incredible folks out there doing what you do, regardless of your background, your origins. And I think that we all have a family here. So I want to sort of pick up on where Ian mentioned about adaptability, and that is an asset. That is something, a skill set that all military veterans can rely on. Having spent 8 years in active Army, for the better part of the 80s and into the early 90s, and my background was communications, 3 different MOSs that I sort of jumped around in, but all communications. So I kind of have some familiarity with respect to radios and energy systems. And so recently I attended an ASU Renewable Energy Boot Camp, a one-week boot camp at Polytech in Mesa, Arizona. I was really fascinated in terms of how the veterans, or at least the militaries, has advanced since my time of service. And so what was really intriguing to me was that the military today has really adopted sustainability, renewable energy into their operations, into their maintenance, and all facets of military readiness. And one thing that I learned that I can go back and say, look, I remember the days when I was given a 5-gallon can of diesel to refuel a generator that was powering our communication node. So that isn't the case that I learned here a couple of years ago while attending this boot camp. Now they have adopted integrated renewable energy, the small photovoltaic that unfolds like a tent. And that's where some of the energy sources are coming from. So the bottom line, at the end of the day message is, why risk a life of a soldier, Marine, or airman to refuel a generator, put him in a line of fire, when you can basically dispatch a renewable energy system to continue the power of a communication system and other forms of equipment that are deployed, whether in the front line or in support. So again, I'm really fascinated to learn some new integration by modern military with respect to sustainability and renewable energy, and also even with respect to water issues. So I'm glad to hear that. But bringing the skill set back home, I think we basically adopt and integrate creativity, advancement, and then adaptability. And so that's basically the skill set of my background in military. That's what I bring to the table here, working for Navajo Nation government, and then acquire additional skill set in sustainability that really helped me to advocate and push the conversation, whether I'm dealing with the Navajo Nation Council or the commissions or various bodies, to say, look, as a veteran, here's what we advocate for, and here's where we need to go. And I think by the mere fact of one being a veteran, I think you basically raise the eyebrow and have folks pin their ear back and say, look, we should listen to this person. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I really want to go back to Roger. As the director of this film, you get to choose your message, your subject. I really want to know, for our audience today out there streaming live and with us today, what is their call to action? What do you want the audience to be left with today? What do you want them to take away from what you've provided us today?
I think with the film itself, there's so many jumping off points. It's what I like to think of as a strategic narrative and a unifying force. I think of narrative as a connective tissue between communities. And, there's not really an immediate policy call to action. Usually, at least when I think of call to action, I think call your senator and tell them to approve or pass a bill. I think that this story, because it operates at such a high level, it's a 40,000 foot view of how all of the dots connect. I would encourage people to understand the narrative and know how to tell this story, even if it's not something that is personal to you. I mean, I am not Native American. I don't have this lived experience. I can talk about this in terms of our national security, our economic well-being, environmental justice, and compassion for all human beings. Right? So those are things that I can relate to. So I ask people to embrace this narrative at whatever entry point works for them, and know how to tell this story, so that when it does come time to ask your senator to approve a certain piece of legislation, you know the case to be made. And sometimes it's a question of giving that person in power the understanding of the narrative and an emotional connection to it. It's not just the bullet points that they might get from a PowerPoint or white paper. There's something powerful about story that when we connect with something emotionally, it tends to linger and be more a part of our consciousness. So understand the story, know how to tell it, know your target audience. And sometimes you have to think of the trusted messenger. Maybe you're not the best messenger for a certain community. So understand that sometimes you have to get out of the way and let other storytellers come in to push that narrative, but you can also educate them on what the essence of that narrative is.
Well, thank you so much, Roger. I'd like to now just do a quick speed round to see for our other speakers here today, from watching the film, what do you hope, or what did you most take away, and what, as someone who is an Indigenous person, whether living in the Navajo, Hopi, or in Native Alaskan communities, what do you hope people take from this film going forward? I'll start with Terza.
I've learned to unmute. Yes, well, just quick lightning round. Context for the region and the communities. It's king. Understanding one size doesn't fit all. And our new Secretary of Interior, Secretary Holland, has said, meet the tribes as they are. And I think Dr. Singer restated that in her own way. The capacity building. So the adaptability of the veterans watching that Edward and Ian talked about, capacity building is key. So you have the idea, you want to go do it, how do you maintain it? And that's something we ran into in Alaska a lot, is you need to build capacity within the communities, the Native Alaskan communities, to continue on, to maintain the infrastructure, to know how to do that. And then third, I would say that don't be a UFO. And again, it goes back to understanding the context, that you can't just UFO into with a silver bullet, with a solution. The solution has to come from the people most deeply impacted by whatever it is you're proposing to do.
Thank you so much, Terza, and great to have you here today. Now to Dr. Singer.
Yeah, I think one thing that I love that was captured, Roger captured, is the integration, or how tightly knit energy and water resources really are across the nation. And I think what's exciting now is there's food, thinking about the whole energy, food, water nexus. So essentially, it's really hard to think about one without impacting the others. So that's my takeaway.
That's right. The water energy nexus is something that's not oft ignored, but very important. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And to Ian.
Real quick, I know we don't have a lot of time. There's just one thing I want to stress to our veterans out there. You know, don't be afraid of jumping into something new. You may not know a lot about solar, but you know, it's the way of the future. I'm sure that you've heard that a lot, but it's out there. Don't be afraid of it. And we look forward to more individuals learning about this renewable energy. And it's a great source of energy. It's clean and reduces our carbon footprint. So embrace it.
Thank you, Ian. And Ed.
Thank you again for having me part of your esteemed panelists. The takeaway from this film is I really want to center your attention, or have you really concentrate on Nicole and her family by saying that they live on top of Black Mesa, not too far from the mine. Come visit Navajo. If you don't know Navajo, never have been to the Southwest, visit the Navajo Nation and the Hopi Nation and experience, the live experience and witness that, see that for yourself, eye it for yourself, smell it for yourself. And then you can walk away and say, look, I've actually been there, I've actually seen it, and there are a lot of places that you could go on Navajo that really depicts the core issues in this film: lack of electricity, lack of indoor plumbing, the poverty, lack of employment opportunities, the high poverty rate, and water issues. So that's what my takeaway is, to invite you to come and see for yourself with your own eyes. And again, thank you for the veteran audience, and thanks always again from the bottom of my heart for your service.
Thank you for that invitation, Ed. Yeah, I have never visited the Navajo Nation, and I would like to at some point. So thank you for that. And to Roger, just any last words for our audience as the director?
Really just what I said about knowing how to tell a story, knowing who your audience is, knowing how to get out of the way if you're not the best messenger to tell that story.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for providing your time and the rights to the film. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining us for this important and productive conversation during Veterans Advanced Energy Week. And thank you so much to our panelists for being here to share their perspectives, as well as to the American Resilience Project again for your partnership on this session. If you'd like to rewatch today's event or share your stream with a colleague, a replay will be available on the Atlantic Council YouTube channel or on our social media platforms. Coming up next in our conference program tomorrow, don't miss day 4, our final day of Veterans Advanced Energy Week. Kicks off at 12 p.m. Eastern with an exciting panel on breaking into the clean energy industry featuring veterans and recruiters working across the sector. Thank you all so much again, and we hope to see you there. Have a great evening.